Adam Peters needs to make one phone call today. One call to East Rutherford because Garrett Wilson, an all-pro receiver who has topped 1,000 yards in 3 straight seasons behind the worst quarterbacks in the league, just entered the trade market, and Charles Robinson of Yahoo Sports confirms teams are already dialing up Jets GM Darren Mauge asking about him. The question is not whether Wilson is worth 2 first-round picks. The question is whether the Commanders can afford to pass on him when McLaurin is coming off the worst season of his career, and there are already people inside the building saying 2026 could be his last year in burgundy and gold. In a minute, I'm going to break down why the contract extension McLaurin signed exactly 1 year ago is the reason this trade is no longer optional. And while Peters is working that trade, Brandon Ayuk posted something this week that stopped the DMV cold on social media. Out loud, said if the 49ers cut him today, he signs with Washington tomorrow. That sounds like a dream until you hear what Adam Schefter is reporting about the red flags front offices around the league are flagging as they evaluate this situation. I'm going to tell you exactly why signing Ayuk could be the best move Peters makes all year, or the most expensive mistake he makes in his tenure. And to close it out, NBC4 Washington published documents from the new RFK Stadium deal this week that dropped a number that hit the DMV like a gut punch. $15,000 per seat, before you buy the season ticket. The fan who held it down through the darkest years of the Snyder era, who kept showing up when this franchise gave them no reason to, deserves to know if they're going to have a seat in that building. We're having that conversation today. Raise hail. Let's build this argument from the ground up, because I think too many people in Commanders Nation are dismissing this one too quickly without doing the real analysis. Step 1 is understanding exactly who Garrett Wilson is and what it means to bring that profile to Washington. Wilson was the 10th pick in the 2022 draft by the New York Jets. Wide receiver out of Ohio State. In his first season, with Zach Wilson throwing him the ball, with one of the most dysfunctional organizations the NFL has seen in the last 20 years behind him, he had 1,103 yards and 4 touchdowns. He won Offensive Rookie of the Year. In his second season, with Aaron Rodgers going down on the first drive of Week 1 with a ruptured Achilles, Wilson put up 1,042 yards. In his third season with Rodgers back, but playing like a shadow of himself, Wilson had 1,104 yards. 3 seasons, 3 times over 1,000 yards, with quarterback play that was the equivalent of throwing the ball left-handed while facing away from the line of scrimmage. In the summer of 2025, the Jets gave him a 4-year, $130 million extension, $90 million guaranteed, $32.5 million per year average value, under contract through 2030. That was a signal that the new Jets regime, with Darren Mauge running football operations, wanted to build around Wilson while they rebuilt everything else. And then came the 2025 season. Justin Fields, Tyrod Taylor, and Brady Cook distributed at quarterback. Wilson made it through 7 games before a knee injury ended his year. 36 catches, 395 yards, 4 touchdowns. Mauge had already sent Sauce Gardner to the Colts, already sent Quinnen Williams to the Cowboys. Jermaine Johnson went to the Titans. The Jets are in full rebuild mode, and according to Charles Robinson, teams that didn't get the receiver they wanted in the April draft are calling Mauge's phone asking about Wilson. Now listen closely, because here is where most of the Wilson versus Commanders analysis is missing the most important piece. The Jets love Wilson, that's real. They're not looking to move him, that's real too. But Mauge extended Gardner and moved him anyway. The logic this GM is operating on isn't emotional. It's the logic of a man who already has the number 2 overall pick in the 2026 draft and several additional first rounders from the Gardner trade, and who is positioning that organization to draft a franchise quarterback in 2027, which is expected to be an elite class. If someone comes in with an offer that gives him more picks to build around that future signal caller, Mauge takes it. That's how cold this business is. The question then becomes, what does Wilson cost? And do the Commanders have the assets to pay it? Bleacher Report's Gary Davenport put together the most concrete package I've seen circulating. Washington's number 7 pick from the 2025 draft combined with the number 29 pick from the same draft. That gives the Jets 2 first rounders to potentially move up in the 2027 draft when their quarterback arrives. And Davenport said explicitly that Washington is not going to get someone as good as Wilson with that 29th pick alone. He's right. And JP Finley of NBC Sports amplifies that from a different angle. Wilson just set the market floor for elite receivers at $30 million per year. McLaurin, after his 2025 extension, is making $32 million per year on his new deal. If the Commanders go to free agency looking for another WR at that level, they're paying $30 million or more annually anyway, with no retained draft capital. Trading picks for Wilson and inheriting his $32.5 million per year average is actually more efficient from a cap construction and long-term roster building perspective. Now here is the argument I think is the most important in this entire conversation, and nobody is articulating it correctly in the DMV public conversation. The Commanders' receiver room has a structural problem that starts with McLaurin but doesn't end there. Terry McLaurin signed his 3-year, $97 million extension in August of 2025 after months of drama, holdout, hold-in, trade request, and when he finally got out on the field, he had the worst season of his career, 10 games, injuries, and a beat reporter is already writing that there are people inside the organization who think 2026 could be his last year with the team. McLaurin turns 30 this season. He missed all of training camp and the entire preseason while the contract negotiation dragged on. Now he's at 2026 OTAs looking healthy and committed, and that's a positive. But the margin for error if he doesn't come back to his 2024 level is enormous. The number McLaurin put up in 2024 was what created the hype that justified the contract. 82 catches, 1,096 yards, 13 receiving touchdowns, a franchise record. But that was McLaurin at his absolute peak, with Jaden Daniels playing a historically incredible rookie season behind him. Can he repeat that after an injury-plagued year, now with David Blau installing a new offensive system as coordinator, now at 30 years old? Look, I could be wrong. I genuinely hope McLaurin comes back at the level we all know he's capable of. But I am not building a contenders roster on just that hope, and that is the real urgency behind the Garrett Wilson trade. This isn't a move to replace McLaurin. It's a move to stop depending on McLaurin being at 100% as the only elite solution on the outside. Because if Wilson is on this roster, what happens to McLaurin in any given week doesn't collapse the Commanders' offensive game plan. From a tactical standpoint in David Blau's system, which takes Shanahan fundamentals and adapts them to Daniels' mobility and processing speed, Wilson is a receiver who can operate on the outside and in the slot. He can run verticals that open the field for play-action concepts. He can create first-level separation with the technical precision of his routes, and not just with raw athleticism. In modern football, that's what separates a first-tier receiver from a second-tier one. The ability to get open when the defense already knows the ball is coming to you. Wilson lined up on the right exterior, McLaurin on the left, Ben Sinnott creating mismatches in the interior as a tight end. That is an offense that makes defensive coordinators across the NFC sit up at 2 in the morning drawing diagrams and still not finding an answer, because there is no base personnel on this conference that can cover that combination without leaving something open somewhere. Daniels in year 3 of his development, with Blau installing a new system and with the objective of being more efficient in third down situations, needs real options across the entire field. Daniels' mobility creates extended play windows that multiply the time available for a receiver to come open. Wilson in that structure, with those routes, with the positional intelligence he demonstrated even with mediocre quarterbacks in New York, is a different weapon than anything the Commanders have had on the outside since the Art Monk era. The counter-argument that deserves honest analysis is Wilson's 2025 season, 7 games. Knee injury. The legitimate question is whether that knee is fully recovered, and any serious front office runs an independent medical evaluation before committing 2 first-round picks. If that evaluation comes back clean, the health risk disappears. If there's a warning signal, the price has to come down to reflect that risk. Peters is not the GM who commits assets without doing that due diligence. But if the medical exam comes back clean, there is no health argument that justifies not making this trade. Timing is also critical. The most likely window for this trade to happen, based on what the Jets are constructing, is either before the trade deadline in October or in the pre-draft period of 2027 when Maugi is positioning to move up for his franchise quarterback. But that might be too late for the chemistry between Daniels and Wilson to develop inside the most important contention window this team has had, which is right now. My position is direct, and I'll defend it completely. Adam Peters needs to make this trade before training camp if Maugi is willing to negotiate. The cost in picks hurts. There's no other way to say it. Losing a 7th and a 29th for the conference you're building in the draft is real. But the value Wilson adds to the 2026 roster in the year that matters most in the Jaden Daniels window is worth that price. And if McLaurin continues to decline, Wilson isn't a luxury anymore. He's a structural necessity. This franchise hasn't been to a Super Bowl since the 1991 season. They have the quarterback, they have the head coach, they have the GM, they have the cap space, they have the picks. The moment is now. And Garrett Wilson is the piece that completes this offense. The Jets love Wilson, but Moggy loves first-round picks more. Peters knows that, and if he hasn't called East Rutherford already, he needs to do it today. Now, here's the story that absolutely exploded this week and changes the context of why the Commanders' need at elite receiver is so urgent right now. Because there is a receiver who doesn't just want to come to the DMV, he literally went on social media and asked his team to cut him so he can sign here. Brandon Ayuk posted this on Wednesday. "Tell them boys cut me today and I'll sign with the Commanders tomorrow." Before that, he'd been posting videos shouting, "Go, Commanders." He posted a football with the Washington logo, calling them the best team in the world. And when people started questioning his behavior, he fired back. "If I'm crazy or if I'm capping, tell them boys cut me today." To understand why this matters, you have to understand where Ayuk stands contractually, because this situation is genuinely one of the most complicated in the entire league right now. In the summer of 2024, Ayuk signed a 4-year, $120 million extension with San Francisco after an entire summer of drama. He played 7 games, went down with a combined ACL and MCL knee injury in October, and that's when the relationship completely collapsed. The 49ers voided $27 million in guaranteed money for 2026 because Ayuk stopped showing up. He cut off communication with Kyle Shanahan. He cut off GM John Lynch. Lynch has said publicly he doesn't expect Ayuk to play for the team again. There's an active arrest warrant in Santa Clara County for a speeding exhibition that Ayuk filmed himself doing in front of the stadium. Adam Schefter said this week that red flags around how Ayuk has handled himself are an active factor in how teams are evaluating him. So here's the direct question I have to put to Commanders Nation. Is Ayuk's risk profile the kind of situation Adam Peters wants to bring into this locker room? Because Peters built this roster with a very specific culture. Dan Quinn has spoken repeatedly about the character standards required in Ashburn, and the Commanders already have one elite talent receiver who came from a contract drama situation, had the worst season of his career after that drama, and is now under contract for 3 more years. They don't need to repeat that pattern. Keep it a buck. Ayuk healthy is a top 10 receiver. His connection with Daniels from the Arizona State era is real and adds value. Under the right conditions, with the right deal structure, that upside is genuine. But the right conditions include an independent medical evaluation of a knee that hasn't seen live game action in more than 20 months, the absence of behavioral red flags in the locker room context, and a contract structure that protects the Commanders if the production doesn't arrive. If Peters can get all of that with Ayuk, it's a high reward bet worth considering. But the market for Ayuk, given everything that's happened, is a 1-year deal with incentives, not a multi-year commitment. And if that's the structure, the Commanders don't have to give up draft picks. What they're committing is roster space and tolerance for risk. My position on Ayuk versus Wilson is clear. If I can choose, I choose the certainty of Wilson over the high upside question mark of Ayuk. But if Peters can structure the Ayuk deal in a way that limits downside while preserving upside, it doesn't have to be an either or. They can coexist. What I can tell you with certainty is this: the Commanders are Brandon Ayuk's preferred destination. That is a real negotiating advantage that Peters should be using to make his receiver move intelligently, not sentimentally. This one hit different on Thursday. NBC4, Washington reviewed public documents from the agreement between Events DC and DC Football Stadium LLC, and those documents show the personal seat license program for the new Commander Stadium could reach a maximum value of $975 million. All of it going toward construction, all of it coming from fans. The math is brutal in its simplicity. $975 million divided by 65,000 seats gives you approximately $15,000 per seat in PSL costs, on average. And that $15,000 is just the right to buy the season ticket. The actual tickets themselves are a separate expense on top. The project itself is genuinely ambitious. A $3.7 billion stadium opening in 2030 on the RFK site, with the Commanders putting in $2.7 billion of their own capital and the district contributing around $1 billion in infrastructure, metro expansion, and public utilities. PSLs are standard industry practice, and 21 of the 32 NFL teams already use them, but Josh Harris himself said on the day the stadium was announced, "My first question always is, how do we make it so that a family that doesn't have all the money in the world can be included in this?" That's the right question. The answer so far from the organization, which is that they're in early stages and committed to a thoughtful approach, is not enough for fans who have been renewing season tickets through the worst years imaginable. I need the Commanders to come back with actual numbers, real tiered pricing, real payment plans for long-term holders. A real mechanism that acknowledges that the fan who stayed through the Dan Snyder era, who renewed when the team was going 5-12, who built this fan base's emotional foundation, that fan deserves a path to that new building that doesn't cost $15,000 before the first ticket is purchased. The old RFK was legendary because it was the people's stadium, that energy, that noise, that atmosphere. It's an asset. Don't price it out of existence in the pursuit of premium revenue. That's everything for today, fam, and if I had to sum up the state of the Washington Commanders right now in one sentence, it would be this: the talent on the field is closer to a Super Bowl than at any point in the last 30 years. But the organization has real problems to solve before that promise becomes a reality. The Garrett Wilson trade is not an offseason dream, it's the move that separates a good team from a genuinely dangerous one in the NFC. And Adam Peters has to make it before training camp. Raise hail, Washington. This is our moment. And I am not about to watch us waste it because we lack the courage to make the call to East Rutherford. Now I need to hear from you. Should the Commanders give up 2 first-round picks for Garrett Wilson? Or do they wait and see if McLaurin bounces back and if Ayuk becomes available? Drop it below. Every comment matters. See you in the next one. Raise hail.